On its face, it was ridiculous that Dot was abducted early in the season and then just went back home as if nothing had occurred. Other than Wayne, nobody could believe she disappeared for a long and returned in time to make their daughter some Bisquick. She set down booby traps like Dustin Hoffman and Straw Dogs, but she was determined to celebrate Halloween with her family while knowing that her captors would lay siege to the house once more. She is the kind of resolute fantasist who thinks she can control reality. This week's episode bursts that bubble in 2 sentences when Roy eventually gets her back to his North Dakota ranch, tied to the ground like an animal. He hisses, "You'll end up the same as Linda. I'll bury you next to her exactly." The majority of the previous episode was spent in Camp Utopia, the women's shelter that Dot had imagined during a pancake-eating daydream. In the time, this seemed like a really creative approach to fill in a significant gap in her backstory. However, it is now evident that she was holding on to the hope that Linda had left Tillman Ranch in order to save herself and may one day return in order to make apologies with Dot and reunite with her son Gator, who had turned evil while she was gone. Dot is adamant about going back to the imaginary life that she has come dangerously close to realizing in the period preceding Roy's admission of Linda's true fate. She must place an order for Scotty's birthday ice cream cake. She works for a Girl Scout unit as a den mother. She needs to finish the 13 seasons of Call the Midwife with Wayne. The unquestionable reality about Roy, however, is that he is a killer with a badge who is unaffected by human law or the sway of a strong attorney like Danish Graves, who gloatingly believed he was winning a negotiation. Dot observes from her hiding place on the ranch that Roy has a pit designated specifically for disposing of corpses. It might be worthwhile to consider how serious Fargo is about spousal abuse at this time. Even though Noah Hawley, the show's creator, has expertly woven his serio-comic yarn this season, it can be challenging to square the show's witty, self-aware, and elusive tone with the content warnings that have surrounded the last 2 episodes. Alyssa Hannigan cover of Britney Spears' Toxic hits a depressing tone when it plays on the soundtrack during Roy's arduous trip back to Dot at the shelter after his humiliation at the county sheriff's debate. Pop songs with dark covers have become a common sight in movie trailers. In this case, it's a precursor to abuse the show can't manage. In this case, what made the puppets in Camp Utopia successful feels more like gender exploitation. The extravagantly ridiculous nature of the violence's precursor isn't helping either. The strategy by Lorraine and Danish to undermine Roy's re-election campaign is undoubtedly the most bizarre of Redemption Service's burdensome debt consolidation alternatives. Danish needs to get 3 Roy Tillman's names changed, guarantee positions for each of them on the Stark County Sheriff debate stage, then subtly agitate the genuine Roy Tillman until he loses it, and slugs the female moderator in order for the plan to succeed. Though the sequence itself is really entertaining, with the false Roys mirroring the actual one like brothers playing tricks on their bigger brother, those seem like a lot of uncertain variables. Could you perhaps provide a puppet-assisted backstory on how Indira and Lars Olmsted ever became a couple? Since that the Roy, Dot, and Linda issue has been made clear, since there is no longer any trace of whatever Lars brought to the table when they fell in love and were married. Before throwing Lars out of the house, Indira lists all of his shortcomings, and now her discovery of him seeing another woman adds adultery to the long list. Indira's household problems have been juxtaposed with Dot's happy marriage to Wayne throughout the season, providing a distinct image of domestic toxicity than Dot's mistreatment at the hands of Roy. They are both female characters on the program who are battling for their own happiness, and the relationship between them is implied. The last scene, which shows Dot looking out of a tiny shattered window on the ranch and realizing how powerful Roy is, gives us a glimpse of her true dread. She had earlier asked him, "You don't have a plan, do you?" Maybe now that she's realized that his lack of a plan is worrisome, she meant it as a rhetorical taunt. He's going to take control of her. After that, he has nothing scheduled. Given his fragility whenever his mother is brought up, there is a chance that Dot will turn on his father as she finds out the truth about what really happened to Linda. Still, he needs to make it through Olmunch first. It's good to see Deputy Whitfar back in the hospital, where he makes an effort to free Dot from Roy's grasp. Although he has previously showed great bravery by confronting the Tillmans, what is particularly moving in this situation is his insistence on referring to Dot as Mrs. Leon. He wants her to know that he accepts her for who she truly is, as does Roy. This episode had a Coen Brothers allusion when Indira opens Lars's mistress's bedroom closet door, reminding us of the scene in Burn After Reading, when George Clooney finds Brad Pitt hiding out. However, the mistress gets off a little easier. Bravo to the Stark County populace for showing up in force for a sheriff's debate. Such events are not expected to be media affairs attended by standing rooms only. Another small-scale allusion to the film. The windmills squeak above the scene where Roy dumps his victims seems to be a reference to the iconic opening sequence of Once Upon a Time in the West, where we first hear a similar sound just before three outlaws ambush Charles Bronson at a train station. In a reverie, she hid the postcard from Linda there, and it's also a reference to that location.